the first programme, John and Yoko were talking about their early days together, culminating in their marriage in Gibraltar. In part 2, Andy Peebles continued his conversation with John and Yoko, discussing their life and music through the period late 1969 to the end of 1971.
November 69, Cold Turkey, which was top 20 in the UK and got to number 30 in America, I think.
Yeah, it was banned here as well. They thought it was a pro-drug song.
What was it to you, John? Was it was something that was very important?
Yeah, because I've always expressed what I've been feeling or thinking at the time, however badly or not, you know, from early Beatle records on. It became more conscious later. So I was just writing the experience I'd had of withdrawing from heroin and saying, this is what I thought when I was withdrawing, you know.
But also musically, it was very interesting. I mean,
yeah, Eric Clapton was on that too.
Yes, and also we did attempt a few musically advanced, interesting things in it.
Yeah, Mark Bolan said it was the only new thing that had happened since the original Beatles when it came out. But I wasn't thinking I'm going to make a new sound. But it was pretty, what they call minimal now, just bass, drums and guitar.
But it was banned in America?
It was banned because it referred to drugs. To me, it was a rock and roll version of The Man with the Golden Arm. You know, it's like banning The Man with the Golden Arm because it showed Frank Sinatra suffering from drug withdrawal. To ban the record is the same thing. It's like banning the movie because it shows reality.
Does it amuse you that people's attitudes have changed over the years? Perhaps amuse is totally the wrong word. How do you both look at it now as people that were involved in it, for want of a better phrase, and were, in your case, were honest enough to come out and put something down on musically on the subject?
I don't think about it that much.
You know, it's just like it's a trip that we went through. But at the same time now, it's cleanup time. And we're really sort of like cleaning our bodies. And, you know, it's very important that.
It's just strange when you hear people are snorting in the White House and that stuff, you know, after the misery they put a lot of people through and like they bust us in England. And I have a record for life. I have problems getting in countries because this guy bust me. I've never denied having been involved with drugs, but at that particular time, there was a question raised in the House of Parliament. Why do they need 40 cops to arrest John and Yoko? That thing was set up. The Daily Mail and the Daily Express were there before the cops came. He'd called the press. In fact, Don Short had told us they're coming to get you 3 weeks before. So believe me, I'd cleaned the house out because Jimi Hendrix had lived there before in this apartment, and I'm not stupid. I went through the whole damn house.
And it caused you a lot of heartache.
It caused me a lot of heartache, and it still does. So I want to know any legal minds listening. How do I get rid of a record? Because the statute of appeals ran out because I don't have a legal mind. And I went to find out about it at one time because I wanted to get this thing off my record. And they told me, oh, you should have applied within the first 2 years. Well, nobody told me that. And the only reason I pleaded guilty because I thought they'd send Yoko away because we weren't married. And I thought, what's the word? They throw it out of the country. So I copped a plea. And the cop said to me, well, we've got you now, so it's nothing personal, you know. And I have problems all around the world because of that record.
Was that arrest after Cold Turkey?
Probably.
I think it probably was.
The picture on the back of Life with the Lions, Unfinished Music #2, is us being dragged out of the police station. It's from a newspaper picture.
Just before Christmas 1969, you did a concert at the Lyceum in the Strand in London with the Plastic Ono Band, including George Harrison, Billy Preston, one of my favourites, and the late lamented Keith Moon, God bless him.
Yeah, and Bonnie and Delaney's whole band.
That's right.
We were talking about that yesterday, funnily enough.
Oh, yes.
It was a UNICEF concert.
It's amazing that it's recorded.
Oh,
I mean,
great,
like
that somebody remembers it. Because we were doing the show, and George and Bonnie and Delaney and Billy and all that crowd turned up. They'd just come back from Sweden, and George had been playing Invisible Man in Bonnie and Delaney's band, which Eric Clapton had been doing, to get the pressure of being the famous Eric and the famous George. They became the guitarists in this, and they all turned up, and it was again like the concert in Toronto. I said, will you come on? They said, well, what are you going to play? I said, listen, we're going to do probably blues or whatever was current, Cold Turkey, which was 3 chords, and Eric knew that, and Don't Worry Kyoko, which was Yoko's, which was 3 chords, a riff. And I said, once we get onto Yoko's riff, just keep hitting it. And it was a fantastic show. I don't think it was recorded. It was fantastic. Very heavy.
I thought it was.
It was recorded.
It came out 3 years later on sometime in New York City.
I know, that was one
I'm
of
sorry.
the reasons
My mind is not that
clever. Sometime in New York City was not that popular because it was such a heavy piece.
That was a heavy show. And a lot of the audience walked out. But the ones that stayed, they were in a trance, man. They just all came to the front because it was one of the first real heavy rock shows where we had a good backing that John and Yoko did together. And I always think that some of those kids formed those freaky bands later because there was about 200 kids at the front there, some about 13, 14, 15, who were looking at Yoko and looking at us the way we were playing that Don't Worry Kyoko, and it really reached the peak of whatever you call it. It really went out there that night.
December 1970, the Plastic Ono Band album, which really did get some pretty good reviews, didn't it?
Yes. The Mother, we did a twin one. Yoko did one, I did one. In fact, you know what we were doing last night?
What were you doing?
We were playing Yoko's Plastic Ono Band album. The first track is called Why, and it was the first real rock and roll take we ever did together, and it's Ringo, Klaus, me on guitar, and Yoko on voice. And the fascinating thing is, even we didn't know where Yoko's voice started and where my guitar ended on the intro, but you can tell. And we were playing it last night for Jack Douglas.
You know, this is something very strange because John, being what he is, somehow he just goes all the way. So his guitar playing in avant-garde was quite avant-garde, really. And we both suffered because people didn't appreciate what we were doing. But in fact, John suffered as an avant-garde guitarist because he was saying, well, I wish somebody would notice what I did. And when you go back to Plastic Ono, Yoko and Plastic Ono Band, that album, I mean, his guitar playing,
Thank you,
somebody
Mother.
should notice it because it's just fantastic
They
stuff.
will. We'll reissue them.
Produced John, Yoko and Phil Spector, if we stick on that for just a moment.
Sure.
And it was the first official solo LP.
Yes.
So you were what you were at long last, and there were no strings attached, so to speak.
Yes, it was nice to do it, and it was minimal again, meaning there was no overdubbing, just my guitar, a bass and drums, or my piano, a bass and drums. And if you remember, at the beginning of Mother, the beginning of the album has this bell going, dong, dong, dong. It's a church bell, which I slowed down to 33, so it's really like a horror movie. And that was like the death knell of the mother-father Freudian trip. If you listen to the beginning of Double Fantasy, you hear ding, ding,
I was just thinking.
ding, which is actually a bell that Yoko calls her wishing bell. I put it on the Double Fantasy as to show the lightness and the difference of the long, long trip from Mother to starting over.
We'll be coming to that later. Rolling Stone gave it a 5-star rating, that album, I seem to remember.
Oh, they did?
And a critic said, like all seminal rock, it's timeless in its concept. That's the sort of quote you appreciate.
Well, it's better than shithead. Oh. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know what you can say anymore in England. I hear all this. You can say anything on TV in England and radio. I'm not sure. But also, it was reviewed as simplistic and self-indulgent.
No, I don't think so. Not
there was.
simplistic,
I never
really?
forget a nasty word, my dear.
Right.
Now, self-indulgent means you talk about yourself. So as
What else can we
again,
talk
I was
about,
talking about this last night. I was saying because somebody said our film Imagine was self-indulgent. And then there was a remark that simplistic and self-indulgent to do with Double Fantasy. Now, I was explaining to somebody, I said, if we'd have used pseudonyms and called it Tommy, the rock opera, or created Ziggy Stardust and Sadie Lutz, and sang exactly the same lyrics as a third persona, then it's more acceptable to certain minds, you see. But still there is a distance between what the records of the songs are saying and our real selves in our own privacy.
Phil Spector was involved there, John. I think somebody that you're pretty fond of.
I'm fond of his work a lot. His personality, I'm not crazy about that.
No.
But it was good to work with Phil because I always admired him. He contributed a lot because he contributed the Spector touch. But of course, if you play John Lennon, Plastic Ono, Yoko Ono, Plastic Ono, he's involved in both, and you play Phil Spector's work, you see there's a vast difference.
Right.
We never gave him his head. Didn't let him go free on it.
Did he want
would
it at the time?
He always wants to. I mean, he's got a tremendous ego.
Yes.
He considers the artist like that film director considers actors just pieces of garbage, canned goods that you bring on and you wheel off. He'd like to bury the artist, and so the production is the main thing. But we didn't allow him to do that to us. But so on that level, it was very good because we used what we considered was his amazing ear for pop music and sound, but without letting it become Spector, to thousands of castanets.
The wall of sound.
We didn't want the wall of sound.
No, right.
But we wanted the outside input.